Before we begin tonight's journey, allow me a moment to speak with you directly. You found something rare in this digital wilderness, a space dedicated to exploring the lives of history's most remarkable men, not the sanitized versions you learned in school, not the mythology peddled by Hollywood, but the truth, complex, contradictory, and deeply human. This channel exists for men who understand that true strength comes from knowledge, who recognize that the greatest leaders were forged in adversity, shaped by failure, and defined by their response to impossible circumstances. Each week, we journey through the life of another iconic figure from history. Warriors, builders, strategists, philosophers, men whose decisions shaped the world we inherited. We examine not just what they achieved, but how they thought, how they led, how they endured. If this resonates with you, if you seek substance over entertainment, wisdom over distraction, then subscribe now. Enable notifications. Because what we do here matters. We preserve the lessons of masculine achievement in an age that increasingly forgets them. Comment below with where you're listening from and which historical figure you'd like us to explore next. Build this community with us. Your engagement determines who we study, whose story we tell. Now settle in, adjust your pillow, close your eyes. Tonight, we travel to May 4th, 1821, to a remote island in the South Atlantic, to the final hours of perhaps the most extraordinary life ever lived. Tonight we meet Napoleon Bonaparte. The sound of waves reaches through the darkness, constant rhythmic, imprisoning. Close your eyes and let yourself drift back through time, across continents, to a place forgotten by the world. It is May 4th, 1821. Near midnight, the air hangs thick with tropical humidity on this volcanic rock they call St. Helena, a British possession lost in the vastness of the South Atlantic Ocean. 1,500 miles to the nearest shore. Further still to France, to home, to glory. Inside Longwood House, a structure that once sheltered a lieutenant governor's horses, but now confines an emperor, a single candle flickers against the encroaching darkness. Its weak flame dances, casting long shadows across walls that have witnessed 6 years of slow decline. In a narrow bed, beneath sheets worn thin from use, lies Napoleon Bonaparte. Once, this man commanded armies of 500,000. Once, he crowned himself emperor, while the Pope stood watching, powerless. Once, his name alone could make monarchs tremble and reshape the borders of nations with the stroke of a pen. Now, at 51 years old, he is simply a man. A dying man. Though he does not yet know, death waits less than 24 hours away. His body, that instrument which carried him across Europe on horseback for 20 years, betrays him now. A tumor grows in his stomach, the same affliction that claimed his father 36 years earlier. The pain comes in waves, sharp and insistent, a reminder that even emperors answer to biology. But listen. Do you hear that? The sound of his breathing, still steady despite the pain. The rustle of sheets as he shifts position, seeking comfort that will not come. This is no Hollywood death scene. There is no dignity here, no profound final words rehearsed for history. Just a man in darkness, his mind wandering through memories of a life so extraordinary that even now, facing the void, he struggles to believe it all actually happened. Did I really do all that? The question surfaces unbidden. Did one man, a Corsican, nobody mocked for his accent and his poverty, truly rise to command an empire stretching from Spain to Poland? The ocean answers with its eternal rhythm. Yes, yes, yes. Let us follow him now into those memories, into the remarkable journey that brought this man to this moment. Not the legend, not the myth, but the truth, as complex and flawed and magnificent as the man himself. Napoleon Bonaparte was born on August 15th, 1769, in Ajaccio, Corsica. Take a moment to understand what this meant. Corsica was not France. Not yet. The Republic of Genoa had sold the island to King Louis XV just 15 months before Napoleon's birth, in May 1768. The Treaty of Versailles transferred ownership as casually as one might sell a horse, but the Corsican people did not consider themselves sold. Led by Pasquale Paoli, they had been fighting for independence. Napoleon's own father, Carlo Bonaparte, had fought alongside Paoli's partisans against French troops. At the Battle of Ponte Nuovo on May 9th, 1769, just 3 months before Napoleon's birth, French forces crushed the resistance. Carlo, pragmatic to his core, switched sides. He made peace with the French governor, Charles-Louis de Marbeuf, who became his patron. This political flexibility would prove a family trait. Napoleone di Bonaparte, as he was christened in the Italian style on July 21st, 1771, was the second surviving child of 8. His mother, Letizia Ramolino, just 19 years old when she bore him, was known for her fierce discipline and iron will. The future destiny of the child, Napoleon would later say, is always the work of the mother. Imagine the boy growing up in Ajaccio, the smell of the Mediterranean, the sound of Italian and Corsican dialects in the streets, French, the language of the occupiers, spoken haltingly at first. Young Napoleon was not gentle. Reports describe him as willful, aggressive, quick to anger. Other children kept their distance. He preferred solitude anyway. Hours spent reading whatever books he could find. Military histories, the lives of great men, Alexander, Caesar, Charlemagne. He learned from them, studied their campaigns, memorized their strategies. At an age when other boys played at war, Napoleon analyzed it. In September 1771, the Bonaparte family's claim to nobility was officially recognized by French authorities, a bureaucratic detail that would change everything. This confirmation of noble status, though they were poor nobility, opened doors that would otherwise remain forever closed. Without that recognition, Napoleon Bonaparte would have remained unknown, another provincial boy trapped by circumstance. But history turned on that bureaucratic stamp. In December 1778, at 9 years old, Napoleon left Corsica forever. His father, leveraging connections with Governor Marbeuf, had secured scholarships for his sons to study in France. Joseph, the eldest, would study for the priesthood. Napoleon would become a soldier. They arrived at the school in autumn on January 1st, 1779. The stated purpose, to perfect their French before military education, began. Picture Napoleon here, 9 years old, speaking French with a thick Corsican accent, surrounded by French boys who immediately marked him as foreign, as other. He lasted just 4 months at Autun, before transfer to the Royal Military School at Brienne-le-Château on May 15th, 1779. Brienne. This name should echo in your memory, for it was here, in this cold institution in Champagne, that the emperor was forged. The school records survive. They paint a revealing portrait, reserved and hard-working, egotistical, extremely ambitious. Translation: he had no friends. He trusted no one. He worked constantly. The other boys, sons of proper French nobility, mocked him relentlessly. His accent, his poverty, his Corsican origins, his small stature. He would never grow taller than 5 feet 6 inches. They called him the Corsican, not as a neutral descriptor, but as an insult. One winter, the school records note, the boys were allowed to build snow forts for recreation. While others worked in groups, laughing and socializing, Napoleon worked alone, building not randomly, but with precision, calculating angles, considering fields of fire, testing defensive positions. The supervising instructor watched, fascinated and slightly disturbed, as this solitary 9-year-old applied genuine military principles to a children's game. He would never relax, the instructor later wrote. Even in play, he was always working. Napoleon excelled in mathematics, consistently top of his class. He memorized artillery trajectories, studied ballistics, consumed books on military engineering, geography, history, fortification. But he struggled with French language and social graces. His written French remained awkward. His spoken French kept its Corsican inflection. The aristocratic boys, who moved through social situations with hereditary ease, found him awkward, intense, too serious. He didn't care, or rather he channeled his isolation into fuel for ambition. In October 1784, at age 15, Napoleon was admitted to the École Militaire in Paris, the military academy that trained officers for the Royal Army. Of the 58 students in his class, most came from ancient noble families with connections to the court. Napoleon Bonaparte, the Corsican outsider, graduated 42nd in his class in September 1785. 42nd. Not first. Not even in the top quarter. But here is what mattered. He graduated a year early, compressing the 2-year program into one, because his father had died in February 1785 of stomach cancer, and the family needed him earning an officer's salary immediately. At 16 years old, Napoleon Bonaparte was commissioned as a second lieutenant of artillery in the La Fère Artillery Regiment. Second lieutenant, the lowest officer rank. Annual salary, 1,200 livres. Enough to survive. Barely. He was assigned to garrisons in Valence and Auxonne, provincial backwaters where nothing of consequence ever happened. This is the man who would conquer Europe? This provincial second lieutenant who graduated in the bottom half of his class? Yes. Because what Napoleon lacked in pedigree, he more than compensated for, with something the aristocrats around him had never needed to develop. Hunger. Not metaphorical hunger. Real hunger for respect, for recognition, for proof that merit could triumph over birth. That hunger would fuel everything that followed. But first, revolution had to destroy the old order that held him down. Let your mind drift forward to 1789. Napoleon is 20 years old, a junior artillery officer stationed in boring provincial garrisons, supplementing his meager salary by sending money home to his family in Corsica. Then Paris explodes, July 14th, 1789. The Bastille falls. The mob storms the ancient fortress prison, kills its defenders, parades the governor's head through the streets on a pike. The revolution has begun. For most French aristocrats, this brings terror. For Napoleon Bonaparte, it brings opportunity. Understand what revolution meant for men like him. Under the Ancien Régime, the old order, advancement depended on 3 things: family connections, money, and aristocratic blood. Napoleon had none of these. His nobility was Corsican and poor. His connections extended no further than his father's friendship with a provincial governor. His prospects were limited to slowly climbing through junior ranks, always passed over for promotion by men whose only qualification was their last name. But revolution destroys old hierarchies, creates vacuums of power, and into vacuums capable men can rise. Napoleon throws himself into the chaos. He reads revolutionary pamphlets voraciously, writes his own essays on Corsican independence, on political theory, on military organization. He aligns himself with the Jacobins, the most radical faction, not from ideological conviction, but from cold calculation. The Jacobins are winning. The Jacobins promote on merit. The Jacobins need capable officers. Between 1789 and 1793, Napoleon spends more time in Corsica than with his regiment, technically desertion. But the revolution has made discipline fluid. He involves himself in the complex three-way struggle between royalists, French republicans, and Corsican nationalists, led by his father's old commander, Pasquale Paoli. Paoli, returned from exile in Britain, remembers Carlo Bonaparte's switch of allegiance. He has no love for the Bonaparte family. When Napoleon sides with the pro-French Jacobins against Corsican independence, Paoli acts decisively. In May 1793, Paoli's followers ransack the Bonaparte family home in Ajaccio. The entire family, Mother Letizia and 7 children, must flee to France as refugees with little more than what they can carry. Napoleon, 23 years old, is now responsible for his mother and siblings. He has no money, no property, no prospects beyond his lieutenant's commission. Then comes the moment that changes everything. September 1793. The port city of Toulon, France's most important Mediterranean naval base, has been seized by royalist rebels and British forces. The Republic desperately needs to retake it. Conventional assaults have failed with heavy losses. The general commanding Republican forces requests additional artillery officers. Captain Napoleon Bonaparte, recently promoted, despite his Corsican origins and questionable revolutionary credentials, arrives to take command of the artillery. He is 23 years old. He has never commanded in battle. The Republican general and his staff present their plans: siege lines, attrition, starve the garrison out. It could take months. They cannot afford months. Napoleon studies the maps, examines the terrain, watches the British fleet in the harbor. Then he speaks. "You're focusing on the wrong objective." The generals stare at this presumptuous captain who dares contradict senior officers. Napoleon points to a promontory overlooking the harbor, Fort Leguillet. "Take that. Place artillery there. The fleet cannot stay under our guns. When the fleet withdraws, the city must surrender. That fort is defended by British Marines. Yes, we attack it. You'll be killed." Napoleon shrugs. "Perhaps, but the mathematics are sound. Control that height, control the harbor. Control the harbor, take the city." The generals, desperate and out of options, let him try. December 17th, 1793. Dawn breaks cold over the Mediterranean. Napoleon personally leads the assault on Fort Leguillet through morning fog. The air fills with musket fire. Men fall around him. A British musket ball strikes Napoleon in the thigh. He staggers but keeps moving. The wound will heal into a lifelong scar, but he ignores it now. They take the fort. His calculations prove correct. Within hours, Republican artillery positioned on the captured height begins shelling the British fleet. Admiral Samuel Hood, commanding the British forces, orders immediate evacuation. By December 19th, the British fleet has withdrawn. The royalist garrison surrenders. Toulon is saved. Captain Napoleon Bonaparte, 24 years old, is promoted to Brigadier General. Let that sink in. 24. Brigadier General. In 2 months, he has risen from obscure captain to general officer, a leap that would normally take decades if it happened at all. His name is now known in Paris. The Committee of Public Safety, the revolutionary government, takes note of this young general who delivers results. But fortune is fickle in revolutionary France. In July 1794, Maximilien Robespierre, leader of the Terror, falls to the guillotine. Napoleon, associated with Robespierre's faction, is briefly imprisoned. His career seems finished before it truly began, yet he's released. The new government, called the Directory, still needs capable officers. They post him to the army of Italy, but he's relegated to planning duty, paper shuffling, not command. By October 1795, Napoleon is in Paris, unemployed, living in a cheap boarding house, subsisting on half pay. At 26, his brief moment of glory seems like ancient history. Then comes October 5th, 1795, 13 Vendémiaire, in the revolutionary calendar. Royalist forces, emboldened by the government's weakness, attempt to overthrow the Directory. 30,000 insurgents mobilize to march on the Tuileries Palace, where the government sits. The Directory has perhaps 5,000 soldiers. They need someone who can organize a desperate defense, someone who won't hesitate to use force against French citizens. Paul Barras, a Directory member, remembers Toulon. He appoints Napoleon Bonaparte to defend the capital. Napoleon has 6 hours to prepare. His first order: bring up artillery from the military depot at Sablons. He sends a young cavalry officer named Joachim Murat, remember that name, with 300 horsemen to seize the guns before royalist forces can capture them. Murat succeeds. 40 cannons reach Paris by nightfall. Napoleon positions artillery at key intersections, on the steps of the Church of St. Roch, covering the bridges, creating interlocking fields of fire. When the royalist mob advances at dawn, confident in their numbers, they find the streets blocked by artillery, manned by men who won't hesitate. Napoleon's orders are simple. If they advance into canister range, fire. They advance. He fires. The famous whiff of grape shot that Napoleon's propaganda will later immortalize. In reality, it's several cannons firing round after round of canister shot, dozens of metal balls per round, turning each cannon into a giant shotgun. The royalist attack breaks. Hundreds lie dead or wounded in the streets. The survivors flee. The Directory is saved, and Napoleon Bonaparte, the young general who just killed French citizens to preserve the government, becomes indispensable. His reward: command of the army of Italy. It's meant as a consolation prize. Italy is a secondary theatre. The real action, the main French armies, operate on the Rhine against Austria. Italy is where they send generals they want to quietly disappear. But Napoleon will turn this backwater command into legend. March 1796. General Bonaparte arrives to take command of the army of Italy. What he finds would discourage a lesser man. 38,000 soldiers, poorly equipped, unpaid for months, uniforms in rags, many without shoes, morale destroyed. They're losing to the Austrians. The officers who meet their new commander see a skinny 26-year-old who stands shorter than most of them. He wears a general's coat that hangs awkwardly on his thin frame. His hair is long and unkempt. He looks, one officer later writes, more like a mathematician than a soldier. Then Napoleon speaks to the army. Picture this moment. Thousands of ragged, hungry men, veterans who have seen too many incompetent generals appointed through political connections. They expect another speech about glory and sacrifice and devotion to the Republic. Instead, Napoleon tells them the truth. "Soldiers," he says, his voice carrying across the field, "you are naked and ill-fed. The government owes you much but can give you nothing. Your patience and courage are admirable, but they bring you no glory." He pauses. "The men are listening now. I will lead you into the most fertile plains in the world. Rich provinces and great cities will be in your power. There you will find honor, glory, and riches. It is a promise of plunder," stated baldly. But it works. Because Napoleon has offered them something revolutionary, commanders rarely provided: honesty combined with hope. Within 2 weeks, Napoleon launches his offensive. The Austrians outnumber him. But Napoleon doesn't fight with superior numbers. He fights with superior organization, speed, and his own mathematical mind, calculating angles, distances, timing. The Battle of Montenotte, April 12th, 1796. Napoleon's first victory as independent commander. He divides the Austrian and Piedmontese forces, defeats them separately. Classic principle: divide and conquer. Then Millesimo, Dago, Mondovi. 4 victories in 3 weeks. The kingdom of Piedmont-Sardinia sues for peace. Napoleon, technically subordinate to the Directory in Paris, negotiates terms himself. He's not authorized to make treaties. He does it anyway. The Directory is too pleased with results to complain. Napoleon pushes into Lombardy. The Austrian army retreats toward Mantua. Napoleon enters Milan in May to cheering crowds. This is where Napoleon discovers something crucial. He's not just a military tactician. He's a political genius. He understands propaganda, public opinion, the theater of power. In Milan, he doesn't loot the city like a conqueror. He presents himself as a liberator. The French Republic, he proclaims, brings freedom from Austrian tyranny. He organizes celebrations. He protects property. He sends art and treasures back to Paris, but he packages it as tribute from grateful allies, not plunder from conquered enemies. The Directory receives millions in gold and silver, masterpieces for the Louvre, all from their obscure general in Italy who was supposed to be a minor concern. But Napoleon's real masterpiece comes in November 1796, the Battle of Arcola, November 15th to 17th. Napoleon needs to cross the Alpone River to attack Austrian positions. But the bridge at Arcola is held by Austrian troops with artillery. Direct assault across an exposed bridge seems suicidal. Napoleon studies the situation. Then he makes a decision that will define his legend. He personally leads the attack, grabs a regimental flag, the tricolor of the Republic, and charges onto the bridge. It's calculated theater and calculated risk. Musket balls zip past him. Officers around him fall. The assault stalls. According to the official accounts written later, Napoleon plants the flag on the bridge, rallying his troops to victory. The truth, preserved in soldiers' letters: Napoleon's aide-de-camp is killed beside him. Napoleon himself falls into a swamp beside the bridge and has to be pulled out, covered in mud. The first assault fails, but the image of Napoleon on the bridge, flag in hand, becomes legend. The painter, Antoine-Jean Gros, immortalizes it. Propaganda prints spread across Europe. The actual Battle of Arcola is won through 3 days of complex maneuvering, not a single dramatic charge. But Napoleon understands. Men follow symbols as much as strategy. The soldiers begin calling him Le Petit Caporal, the little corporal. It's a term of affection, of awe. January 1797. The Battle of Rivoli. Napoleon's greatest tactical victory in Italy. He defeats 5 separate Austrian attacks through superior positioning and internal lines of communication. His forces can shift position faster than the Austrians can react. By February, Austria sues for peace. Napoleon, again exceeding his authority, negotiates the Treaty of Campo Formio himself. The army of Italy, that ragged, starving force he inherited 13 months earlier, has conquered northern Italy, defeated 5 Austrian armies, forced Austria, a great power with centuries of imperial history, to beg for peace. Napoleon returns to Paris in December 1797. He is 28 years old, a national hero. The Directory, which sent him to Italy to get him out of the way, now fears him. He's too popular, too successful, too ambitious. They need him away from France, away from the army that worships him. So they approve his mad proposal, an expedition to Egypt. Napoleon will later call Egypt his greatest strategic error. At the time, in 1798, it seems brilliant. Strike at British interests by threatening India. March in the footsteps of Alexander the Great. In May 1798, Napoleon sails from Toulon with 40,000 men and over 150 scientists and scholars. The fleet evades the British Navy through luck and fog. They land in Egypt on July 1st. Napoleon takes Alexandria immediately, then marches toward Cairo. July 21st, 1798. The Battle of the Pyramids. Picture this scene. The French army arrayed in huge squares, infantry bristling with bayonets forming human fortresses, cavalry protected inside, artillery at the corners, charging toward them across the desert, thousands of Mameluke warriors, the finest cavalry in the east, magnificent horsemen on Arabian horses, armed with curved scimitars, pistols, and 500 years of military tradition. Before the battle, Napoleon points to the pyramids visible in the distance. "Soldiers," he declares, "from the summit of yonder pyramids, 40 centuries look down upon you. It's pure theatre, but brilliant theatre." Napoleon understands that men fight better when they believe history is watching. The Mamelukes charge, the French squares hold, disciplined musket fire tears through the cavalry. Artillery shreds their formations. The Mamelukes are brave, suicidally brave. But courage cannot overcome modern military science. By sunset, the Mameluke army is destroyed. Cairo surrenders. Egypt is Napoleon's. But triumph lasts exactly 1 week. August 1st, 1798. Aboukir Bay. British Admiral Horatio Nelson finds the French fleet anchored off the Egyptian coast. In a devastating night battle, the Battle of the Nile, Nelson destroys the French navy. Napoleon's army is stranded, cut off from France, isolated in a hostile land thousands of miles from home. For a lesser commander, this is catastrophe. For Napoleon, it's merely a complication. He marches into Syria, lays siege to the fortress of Acre. But here, for perhaps the first time, he meets genuine defeat. The siege fails. Plague ravages his army. He retreats to Egypt. Then, in August 1799, news reaches him from France. The Directory is collapsing. France is in crisis. Coalition armies threaten the Republic's borders. Napoleon makes a decision that many call treasonous. He abandons his army in Egypt. He takes a fast frigate, runs the British blockade, sails back to France, leaving his soldiers stranded. Those soldiers will surrender to the British 2 years later. But Napoleon sees the larger picture. Egypt was always secondary. France is the prize. He arrives in Paris in October 1799. The political situation is exactly as chaotic as he'd hoped. November 9th to 10th, 1799. The coup of 18 Brumaire. Napoleon, his brother Lucien, and several conspirators attempt to overthrow the Directory. It nearly fails. When Napoleon addresses the Council of 500, deputies shout him down. Some call for him to be outlawed. a death sentence. Lucian, president of the council, saves the day by calling in soldiers to protect the legislature from assassins. The coup succeeds. Barely, messily, but it succeeds. The Directory falls. A new government rises. The consulate, 3 consuls will lead France. Napoleon Bonaparte is named first consul. He is 30 years old. Within months, a new constitution is ratified, written largely by Napoleon. It grants him near dictatorial power. The revolution that began in 1789 with dreams of liberty, equality, and fraternity ends with military dictatorship. France, exhausted by a decade of chaos, embraces it. They want order. They want stability. They want victory. Napoleon will give them all 3, and far, far more than they bargained for. Let your thoughts drift now through the years of triumph, the years when Napoleon seemed invincible, when his genius burned brightest, when all of Europe bent before his will. First Consul Bonaparte, for he is not yet emperor, faces a France exhausted by a decade of revolution. The economy is shattered, the currency worthless. Law is a patchwork of revolutionary decrees and pre-revolutionary customs. The Catholic Church, attacked and persecuted during the Terror, remains hostile to the government. Infrastructure crumbles, schools barely function. Other men would see only problems. Napoleon sees opportunities. He works 16, 18 hours a day. His subordinates are astounded by his energy, his focus, his ability to master details across every domain of government. Listen to this routine, recorded by his secretary. He rises at 7. Breakfast while reading military reports. 8 o'clock. Meetings with ministers, interior, finance, war, foreign affairs. He grills them, testing their knowledge, exposing weak thinking. Noon. Lunch, always brief, often standing. He eats quickly, barely tasting food. More meetings through afternoon. 6 o'clock. Dinner with Josephine and guests. He dominates conversation, asking questions, listening intently. 9 o'clock. Returns to his office. Works until midnight or later. 4 hours sleep. Then repeat. This is not occasional intensity. This is his daily existence for years. His first major reform, the Concordat of 1801. An agreement with Pope Pius VII that recognizes Catholicism as the religion of the majority of Frenchmen, but not the state religion. The Church gives up claims to confiscated lands. In return, Napoleon restores Catholic worship, its political genius. He heals a wound that threatened to tear France apart. Catholic peasants, the majority, can now support the government. The Pope recognizes Napoleon's regime, and Napoleon ensures the Church remains subordinate to the state. Next, the Banque de France, established in 1800 to stabilize currency and provide state credit. It works. Within 2 years, the French economy begins recovering. Education reform. He creates lycées, elite secondary schools, producing future administrators and officers. Universal primary education comes later, but Napoleon establishes the principle. Merit-based advancement requires systematic education. But his greatest domestic achievement is the Napoleonic Code, officially the Civil Code of 1804. Picture the legal chaos Napoleon inherited. France had no unified law. The North followed customary law. The South followed Roman law. Hundreds of local variations. Revolutionary governments had issued thousands of contradictory decrees. Napoleon appoints a commission of legal experts. But he doesn't just sign their work. He personally participates in drafting sessions. 102 sessions over 4 years. He attends 57 of them, often presiding for hours. The Code Napoleon establishes equality before the law, no privileges based on birth, protection of property rights, crucial for establishing economic confidence, religious tolerance, any religion or none. Civil marriage, the state, not the church, validates marriages. Meritocracy in government positions, jobs go to the qualified, not the connected. It's not perfect. Women have fewer rights than under some revolutionary laws, but it's systematic, clear, and revolutionary in establishing legal equality. The code spreads across Europe with Napoleon's armies. Belgium, Italy, Poland, parts of Germany adopt it. Even after Napoleon's fall, much of Europe keeps the code's principles. Louisiana still uses it today. In April 1802, exhausted by years of war, Britain makes peace in the Treaty of Amiens. For the first time since 1792, France is at peace with all of Europe. Napoleon uses the peace to consolidate power. In May 1802, a plebiscite, a direct vote, asks French citizens, should Napoleon Bonaparte be made consul for life? The result? 3,568,885 votes, yes. 8,374 votes, no. It's not quite a legitimate election, but the overwhelming margin reflects genuine popularity. Napoleon has brought order from chaos, stability from revolution, victory from defeat. As consul for life, he now has power approaching a monarch's. But that's not enough. May 18th, 1804. The Senate, packed with Napoleon's supporters, declares Napoleon Bonaparte Emperor of the French. Note the title carefully. Not Emperor of France, but Emperor of the French. The distinction matters. He claims to rule by popular sovereignty, not divine right. The people, theoretically, have chosen him. Another plebiscite, 3,572,329 votes, yes. 2,579 votes, no. Again, the process is managed, but again, the margin reflects real support. December 2nd, 1804. Notre Dame Cathedral, Paris. Napoleon's coronation. Pope Pius VII has travelled from Rome to officiate, a tremendous coup for Napoleon's legitimacy. The cathedral is filled with Napoleon's family, his marshals, government officials, foreign diplomats. The ceremony follows ancient tradition, robes, rituals, sacred oils. But then comes the crucial moment. The Pope raises the crown to place it on Napoleon's head. Napoleon takes it from his hands and places it on his own head himself. Then he takes the second crown and places it on Josephine's head, making her empress. The message is unmistakable. Napoleon acknowledges no power above his own, not the church, not God, not tradition. He crowns himself. The painter, Jacques-Louis David, immortalizes the moment. The massive canvas shows Napoleon with crown in hand, Josephine kneeling, the Pope watching helplessly. It's propaganda. But brilliant propaganda. Napoleon understands what modern politicians often forget. Symbols matter as much as substance. He is 35 years old. In 15 years, he has risen from unemployed artillery officer to emperor. The Corsican outsider now wears a crown. But crowns must be defended. And Britain, France's eternal rival, has already broken the Peace of Amiens. War resumes. Napoleon masses 200,000 men at Boulogne, on the English Channel. The invasion of Britain, his great dream. If his fleet can control the Channel for just 6 hours, the Grande Armée can cross. 6 hours to change history. But his admirals fail him. Admiral Villeneuve, commanding the combined French-Spanish fleet, refuses to face Nelson's British Navy. He retreats to Cadiz. Napoleon's invasion plans crumble. Then Austria, encouraged by British gold, prepares war. Russia joins her. Sweden, too, the third coalition against France. Napoleon faces a choice: wait at Boulogne for a naval miracle, or march east to crush Austria before the Russians arrive. On July 23, 1805, he receives news that Villeneuve has returned to Europe. On July 24th, Napoleon orders the Grande Armée to break camp at Boulogne and march east. 1 week later, October 21st, Admiral Nelson destroys the French-Spanish fleet at Trafalgar. Villeneuve is captured. Britain's naval supremacy is assured. Napoleon will never invade Britain. But on October 21st, 1805, he doesn't know about Trafalgar yet. He's already marching into what will become his greatest triumph. Let your mind settle into this moment, this battle, often called Napoleon's greatest victory, certainly his most perfectly executed. The situation in late November 1805, Napoleon has maneuvered brilliantly. His Grande Armée, 7 corps totaling 210,000 men, has marched from the Rhine to the Danube in record time. He's trapped an Austrian army under General Mack at Ulm and forced their surrender. 27,000 prisoners without fighting a major battle. He's taken Vienna on November 13th, the Austrian capital, captured almost without resistance. But Napoleon's situation is actually desperate. His army is overextended, 900 miles from France, supply lines stretched impossibly thin, winter approaching, and the Austrians, after Ulm's humiliation, have linked up with the Russians. Combined, they outnumber him. 85,000 Austro-Russian troops under the personal command of Tsar Alexander I of Russia and Emperor Francis I of Austria. 2 emperors commanding 1 army. Napoleon has 73,000 men. He's outnumbered, deep in enemy territory. His supply situation is critical. Any conventional general would retreat, wait for reinforcements, avoid battle. Napoleon does the opposite. He sets a trap. First, he chooses the battlefield, near the village of Austerlitz in Moravia, modern Czech Republic. He studies the terrain personally, riding across it with his generals. "Gentlemen," he tells them, "examine this ground carefully. It is going to be a battlefield, and you will have a part to play upon it." The key terrain feature, the Pratzen Heights, a plateau rising about 300 feet above the surrounding ground. Whoever controls it dominates the battlefield. Napoleon orders French forces to occupy the Pratzen Heights. Then, as the Allied armies approach, he abandons it. He deliberately makes his army look weak, sends Emritri F. continuissaries to request negotiations, making himself appear desperate, orders his right flank thinned out, making it look vulnerable. The Allied commanders see what they want to see, a weak enemy ripe for destruction. They plan to attack Napoleon's right flank with overwhelming force. 3 columns, 59,000 men. Smash through, then wheel north and envelop his entire army. To do this, they must abandon the Pratzen Heights and march their forces south. It's exactly what Napoleon wants. On the evening of December 1st, Napoleon rides among his troops. He doesn't need to. His orders are already given. But he understands morale. Tomorrow is December 2nd, the 1-year anniversary of his coronation as emperor. His soldiers spontaneously light torches and improvised candles. Thousands of flickering lights suddenly illuminate the camp. They shout, "Vive l'Empereur! Long live the Emperor!" Napoleon, moved despite himself, has tears in his eyes. Later, he'll say it was the finest evening of his life. But sentiment doesn't cloud his mind. That night, he receives news that Marshal Davout's 3rd Corps has completed a forced march and will arrive at dawn. That gives him 8,000 additional men, and more importantly, allows him to hold his right flank while executing his real plan. December 2nd, 1805. Dawn breaks cold. Thick fog covers the battlefield, a stroke of luck that conceals French positions. At 7 a.m., as the fog begins to lift, the Allied attack begins. 3 massive columns, Russian and Austrian infantry in their tens of thousands, march south toward the French right flank. They abandon the Pratzen heights. Napoleon, watching from the Zuren hill with his telescope, sees it happening. He turns to Marshal Soult, commanding the center. "How long will it take you to move your divisions to the top of the Pratzen heights?" 20 minutes, sire. Then we will wait another quarter hour. This is Napoleon's genius, the discipline to wait, to let his enemy commit, to resist the urge to act prematurely. At 8:45 a.m., with most of the Allied forces now engaged against his right flank, Napoleon gives the order. One sharp blow and the war is over. Soult's divisions, 22,000 men, surge forward through the thinning fog and up the Pratzen heights. They're attacking uphill, which normally favors the defenders. But there are almost no defenders. The Allies have stripped the heights to feed their attack on Napoleon's right. The few Russian units still on the heights are caught completely by surprise. Within an hour, the French control the plateau. Now Napoleon has the high ground. His artillery can fire down onto the Allied columns. More importantly, he's cut the Allied army in 2. The northern section, under Russian Prince Bagration, fights hard against French Marshal Lannes. It's a brutal, close-quarters infantry battle. Charges and countercharges. Artillery at point-blank range. But Lannes holds. The southern section, the bulk of the Allied army, suddenly realizes they're in a trap. They're fighting the French right flank, but French forces now hold the heights behind them, cutting off their retreat. Russian General Buxhowden tries to extract his columns, but coordinating retreat under fire, with enemy controlling the high ground, proves impossible. The battle becomes a slaughter. Russian units try to escape across the frozen Sachin ponds. Napoleon orders artillery to fire on the ice. It cracks. Hundreds of men plunge into freezing water. Most drown. By afternoon, the Allied army is shattered. Tsar Alexander I, commanding in person, must flee the field. His forces have lost approximately 27,000 men, killed, wounded, or captured. Nearly 1/3 of his army. French casualties, 9,000. Still heavy, but a clear victory. That night, the Austrian emperor requests an immediate armistice. The Russians withdraw east. The Third Coalition collapses. December 6th, Treaty of Pressburg. Austria cedes vast territories, pays enormous indemnity, forced to leave the war entirely. Napoleon has won in 6 weeks a campaign that conventional wisdom said would require years. The map of Europe is redrawn, and the Holy Roman Empire, that ancient institution dating back to Charlemagne's coronation in 800 AD, is dissolved. 1,000 years of history ended by one man's will. Napoleon is 36 years old, master of continental Europe. But mastery breeds enemies. Prussia, watching Napoleon's growing power, decides to act. They issue an ultimatum in September 1806. Withdraw French forces from German territories or face war. It's a catastrophic miscalculation. Prussia's army lives on the reputation won by Frederick the Great. But Frederick died 20 years ago. His army's tactics are obsolete. Their commanders are old men fighting old wars. Napoleon's Grande Armée moves with speed that stuns the Prussians. In October 1806, Napoleon faces the main Prussian army. October 14th, twin battles at Jena and Auerstedt. Napoleon personally commands at Jena, crushing the Prussian left wing. 20 miles north, Marshal Davout, with just 27,000 men, defeats the main Prussian army of 63,000 at Auerstedt through superior tactics and discipline. The Prussian army, Europe's most feared military force, ceases to exist as a fighting force. Napoleon takes Berlin on October 27th. By December, Prussia is effectively conquered. Her fortresses fall one by one. Her king flees east to Russian protection. Napoleon stands in the palace at Berlin and issues the Berlin Decree, establishing the continental system. All European ports under French control are closed to British trade. It's economic warfare. If Napoleon cannot invade Britain, he will strangle her commerce, bankrupt her, force her to terms through economic pressure. It's strategically sound. Britain's power rests on trade. Cut her trade, cut her power. But it requires total European compliance. Any leak in the blockade undermines the system, and as Napoleon will learn, forcing compliance will require endless enforcement, endless wars. Russia, Prussia's ally, continues fighting into 1807. Napoleon marches into Poland, then East Prussia. The battles are hard. Eylau in February is indecisive, with horrific casualties on both sides. But in June, at Friedland, Napoleon wins decisively. 20,000 Russian casualties. Their army retreats in disorder. Tsar Alexander I asks for armistice. June 25th, 1807. The Niemen River, marking the border between Russian and Prussian territory. A raft is built and anchored in the middle of the river, neutral territory. Napoleon Bonaparte and Tsar Alexander I meet face to face. Two emperors. No advisors initially, just the two of them. They talk for hours. What they say is not fully recorded, but the result is clear. They divide Europe between them. The treaties of Tilsit create a Franco-Russian alliance. Russia acknowledges French dominance in Western and Central Europe. France acknowledges Russian interests in Eastern Europe and the Baltic. Prussia is devastated, loses half her territory, reduced to a second-rate power. Napoleon creates new kingdoms for his family. His brother Joseph becomes King of Naples, later King of Spain. His brother Louis becomes King of Holland. His brother Jerome becomes King of Westphalia. His stepson Eugene becomes Viceroy of Italy. The map of Europe is remade according to Napoleon's will. At 40 years old, Napoleon controls the largest empire Europe has seen since Rome, from Spain to Poland, from the North Sea to southern Italy, all directly ruled or subservient to France. Only Britain remains defiant, protected by her navy, funded by her vast commercial empire. Napoleon looks across the Channel and plans. The continental system will work, must work. Britain will be forced to make peace. He believes this, believes his system is sustainable, believes Europe will accept French hegemony. He is wrong. The seeds of his downfall are already planted, but he cannot see them yet. Not here, at the apex of his power. Not here, at Tilsit, where two emperors divide the world between them. But before we follow Napoleon into the abyss, we must understand the woman who defined his heart. Of all Napoleon's relationships, one stands above others in emotional complexity, Josephine de Beauharnais. Their meeting, late 1795. Napoleon is 26, recently appointed commander of the Army of the Interior for defending Paris. Josephine is 32, widow of Alexandre de Beauharnais, executed during the Terror, mother of 2 children, running out of money. She visits Napoleon's office seeking return of her late husband's sword, confiscated during the Revolution. Napoleon, still awkward with women, is immediately captivated. Josephine is everything Napoleon is not. Socially sophisticated, born into privilege, comfortable in aristocratic circles, beautiful in the classical French style, though her teeth are bad, common in that era. She learns to smile without showing them. She's also 6 years older, has 2 teenage children, and her reputation is complicated. Rumors suggest she's had affairs with several powerful men since her husband's death. Survival tactics in dangerous times. Napoleon doesn't care. He's fallen completely. Their courtship, brief, intense. Napoleon writes letters that are almost embarrassing in their passion. I awake consumed with thoughts of you. Your portrait and the memory of last night's intoxicating pleasures have robbed my senses of repose. Sweet and matchless Josephine, how strangely you work upon my heart. Josephine is more practical. She likes Napoleon. He's clearly going places. But love? She's unsure. Her friends think he's odd, too intense, too Corsican, too Napoleon. She marries him anyway on March 9th, 1796. Civil ceremony. She lies about her age, claims 29, actually 32. He lies about his, claims 28, actually 26. Starting marriage with mutual dishonesty. Not auspicious. 2 days later, Napoleon leaves to take command of the army of Italy. He writes constantly. She writes occasionally. During the Italian campaign, Napoleon achieves glory. Returns to Paris a hero. Josephine is now married to the most famous general in France. But cracks appear. Napoleon learns she's been having an affair with a young cavalry officer. He's devastated, confronts her. She cries, promises fidelity. He believes her, wants to believe her. They reconcile. For a while, it seems to work. Then Egypt. Napoleon takes her to Toulon before departing, shows her the fleet. She returns to Paris. During his absence, 18 months, she resumes affairs. Napoleon learns of this in Egypt. His officers know, the army knows, everyone knows except him, until finally, one of his aides tells him. Napoleon is humiliated. The conquering general, cuckolded. He considers divorce. Instead, he takes a lover himself in Egypt. Pauline Faure, wife of a French officer. Fair is fair. But when he returns to France in October 1799, he still loves Josephine. Can't help himself. They reconcile again. As first consul and later emperor, Napoleon needs an heir. This becomes the central problem. Josephine is now in her 40s. She's had children with her first husband, so Napoleon initially thinks himself the problem. He has affairs, gets mistresses pregnant. So it's not him. It's her. She can't have more children. Napoleon needs a legitimate heir. Someone to inherit the empire. Dynastic concerns outweigh personal feelings. December 1809, he tells Josephine they must divorce, for the good of France, for the dynasty. She's hysterical, collapses, weeps for hours. This is her nightmare. She's expected it for years, but hoped it wouldn't come. January 1810. The divorce is finalized. Josephine retains her title as Empress. Napoleon grants her estates, income, ensures she'll be comfortable. But they're no longer married. It breaks something in both of them. Napoleon immediately begins negotiations for a new bride, Marie-Louise of Austria, daughter of Emperor Francis I. She's 18. Napoleon is 40. She's been taught to hate him her entire life. He's destroyed Austrian armies 5 times. But Austrian political necessity overrides personal feelings. The marriage happens in April 1810. March 1811. Marie-Louise gives birth to a son. Napoleon II. The heir Napoleon needed. He's overjoyed, but he never loves Marie-Louise. She's a means to an end. Sweet, pliable but not Josephine. May 29, 1814. Josephine dies at her estate of Malmaison, age 50. Pneumonia. She's been walking in gardens without appropriate clothing. Vanity, refusing to dress for the weather. Napoleon is at Elba when he hears. He locks himself in his room for 2 days. Weeps. His companions hear him sobbing. She was the great love of my life, he later tells someone. I needed an heir. But I should have kept Josephine. On St. Helena, in his final days, Josephine is apparently in his thoughts. Whether he actually says her name as he dies, sources disagree. But several witnesses report it. After everything, the glory, the empire, the second marriage, it's Josephine he thinks of at the end. Let your mind drift now toward catastrophe, toward the decision that will break Napoleon's empire, toward the greatest military disaster of the 19th century. Why does Napoleon invade Russia? Understanding this question is crucial to understanding his downfall. The surface reason: Russia has broken the continental system. Tsar Alexander I, facing economic collapse from the British blockade, has reopened Russian ports to British trade. This undermines Napoleon's entire strategy against Britain. But deeper currents run beneath this surface. Napoleon's empire is unsustainable. It requires constant military pressure to maintain. Any crack in his dominance encourages rebellion. If Russia can defy him with impunity, others will follow. More personally, Napoleon believes in his own destiny. He has won every campaign except the Peninsular War, which he views as a subordinate theatre. He has defeated Austria 5 times, Prussia once. He has never faced the Russians at full strength and lost. Hubris, that Greek word for excessive pride, the fatal flaw of heroes. Napoleon in 1812 believes he is invincible. More than that, he believes he is necessary, that only he can order Europe properly. That resistance to his vision is not just political opposition, but failure to understand historical necessity. He will regret this belief. But not yet. In 1811, he begins planning. Not a raid, not a limited campaign, but total conquest. He will crush Russia so completely that no other power will dare challenge France again. He summons the largest army Europe has ever seen. Numbers alone cannot convey the magnitude of Napoleon's 1812 army. But try to visualize it. 685,000 men. Perhaps more, historians debate exact figures, but certainly over 600,000. For comparison, the entire population of Paris in 1812 was roughly 600,000. This is not just a French army, it's a European army. 450,000 from France and French-controlled territories. 90,000 from the Grand Duchy of Warsaw, Polish troops. 30,000 Austrians, reluctant allies. 20,000 Prussians, forced allies. 25,000 Germans from various Confederation of the Rhine states. 30,000 Italians, plus Spaniards, Portuguese, Swiss, Croatians, Dutch. The Grande Armée speaks a dozen languages, marches under dozens of flags, represents nearly every nation in Europe except Britain and Russia. But they have one thing in common. Napoleon commands them. The logistics are staggering. Napoleon, that mathematical genius, calculates everything. 200,000 horses requiring 15 million pounds of fodder. 6,000 wagons carrying supplies. 26 bakeries on wheels, each capable of producing 8,000 rations daily. Mobile hospitals, ammunition trains, pontoon bridges. It's the most carefully planned operation in military history to that point. Napoleon has studied every detail. He knows the roads, the rivers, the distances. He has calculated the supply consumption rates, the march speeds, the time required. He has planned for everything, except Russian will. The army crosses the Niemen River on June 24th, 1812, the official start of the invasion. Napoleon crosses on a pontoon bridge with his Imperial Guard. No declaration of war. No ultimatum. Just 685,000 men walking into Russia. The initial advance is swift. The Russians retreat. Barclay de Tolly, commanding Russian forces in the west, refuses battle. He falls back toward the interior. Napoleon pursues. But something is wrong. The army is shrinking. Not from battle. There have been no major battles, but from disease, exhaustion, desertion, and the need to garrison supply centers. Within 8 weeks, before any significant combat, Napoleon's main force has lost 200,000 men. 1/3 of his strength. Gone. The heat is brutal. June turns to July, and temperatures soar. Men march in wool uniforms designed for European temperate climate. They collapse from heat stroke. Horses die by thousands. The distances are vast, far vaster than Napoleon's campaigns in Germany or Italy. Towns are small and poor. The countryside, when the army reaches it, has been stripped. The Russians are burning their own land as they retreat. Napoleon's supply system, meticulously planned, begins to fail. The wagons cannot keep up. The roads, such as they are, break down under the weight of traffic. What looked sufficient on paper proves inadequate in reality. But Napoleon pushes on. He needs battle, needs to destroy the Russian army, force a surrender. Every day without decisive engagement is a day his army weakens. Finally, at Smolensk, the Russians stand and fight. Barclay has been reinforced by Prince Bagration's army. They decide to defend this ancient city. Napoleon attacks on August 16th. The fighting is savage. The city catches fire. Whether from French artillery or Russian scorched earth policy is disputed. But by August 18th, Smolensk is a burning ruin. The Russians retreat again. Napoleon has his victory, but it's hollow. He's destroyed a city he needed for supplies. Russian casualties, 12,000. French casualties, 10,000. The Russian army remains intact. Napoleon seriously considers stopping here, wintering in Smolensk, consolidating, resuming campaign in 1813 with fresh supplies. But politically, this looks like failure, like giving up. His subordinates sense his hesitation. Some privately hope he'll stop. Napoleon makes his fatal decision. Continue to Moscow. One more push. Capture the ancient capital. Force Tsar Alexander to negotiate. Moscow is 250 miles further east. But it's Moscow, symbolic heart of Russia. Its capture must bring peace. Must. The Russians, under their new commander, Mikhail Kutuzov, finally give Napoleon what he's wanted. Decisive battle. September 7th, 1812. The village of Borodino, about 75 miles west of Moscow. Kutuzov has chosen good ground, a series of ridges and fortifications, the Kolocha River protecting his right flank, his left anchored on woods and ravines. His army, 120,000 infantry, 15,000 cavalry, 640 guns. Napoleon's army, 130,000 infantry, 40,000 cavalry, 587 guns. The numbers are roughly equal. But Napoleon's men are exhausted. Many are sick. They've marched 600 miles into Russia. Supply is inadequate, and Napoleon himself is ill, possibly suffering from early symptoms of the cancer that will kill him. The battle begins at 6 a.m. with a French artillery bombardment. What follows is 12 hours of concentrated horror. This is not a battle of clever maneuver. No brilliant flanking movements, no tactical masterpiece. Just two enormous armies smashing against each other, trading lives for meaningless ground, industrial-scale slaughter. The Great Redoubt, a Russian fortification at the center, changes hands multiple times. French cavalry charges, Russian counterattacks, artillery firing at ranges so close the gunners can see individual faces. At one point, Napoleon's marshals beg him to commit the Imperial Guard, his strategic reserve, the best troops in Europe. A final push might break the Russian center. Napoleon refuses. He's 600 miles from France. If he loses the Guard, he has no army left. By evening, the French control the battlefield. The Russians withdraw in relatively good order. By the mathematics of war, it's a French victory. The casualties tell a different story. French and Allies, 28,000 to 35,000 killed and wounded. Russians, 38,000 to 45,000 killed and wounded. Total, approximately 70,000 casualties in one day. The bloodiest single day of the Napoleonic Wars. One of the bloodiest days in human history until World War I. Napoleon has won, but he hasn't destroyed the Russian army. They retreat toward Moscow, battered but functional, and he's paid a terrible price for ambiguous gains. September 14th, 1812. Napoleon enters Moscow. The city is nearly empty. Population normally 270,000. Now perhaps 10,000 remain. The rest have fled. Napoleon waits for the city's delegation to surrender formally. Offer the keys to the city. Plead for mercy. The normal choreography of conquest. No one comes. That night, fires begin. Whether started deliberately by Russian governor Fyodor Rostopchin or accidentally by French soldiers looting, historians still debate this. But Moscow burns. For 3 days and nights, fires rage. 3/4 of the city is destroyed. Wooden buildings, dry from summer drought, burn like kindling. Napoleon watches from the Kremlin. The flames reflect in his eyes. Smoke darkens the sky. He has captured Moscow, but there's nothing left to capture. No supplies, no shelter for his army, no symbolic victory, just ashes. Still, he waits for Tsar Alexander to offer peace. The offer never comes. Alexander, safely in St. Petersburg, 400 miles north, refuses all negotiation. He will accept nothing less than complete French withdrawal. Napoleon, for once in his life, doesn't know what to do. His genius for decision-making fails him. He waits. Days turn to weeks. His subordinates grow anxious. Winter approaches. The army needs shelter, supplies, preparation. Napoleon waits. He sends peace feelers to Alexander. No response. He waits. October passes. The first snows begin to fall. Finally, on October 19th, Napoleon orders retreat. His army, now 110,000 strong, reduced from 130,000 at Borodino just 6 weeks earlier, begins marching west. The nightmare begins. If you've seen films about the retreat from Moscow, erase those images. The reality was worse than any dramatization. The initial retreat is relatively orderly. The army moves southwest toward Kaluga, hoping to use a southern route with untouched territory. October 24th, Battle of Maloyaroslavets. Napoleon tries to force his way south. Kutuzov's army blocks him. The battle is indecisive, but Kutuzov holds the road. Napoleon makes another fatal choice: return via the northern route. The same roads they used advancing, roads already stripped of supplies, through territory already devastated. Early November. The weather is actually moderate, not the killing cold of legend, but cold enough, and the army is already disintegrating. Why? Starvation. The supply wagons have been abandoned or destroyed. Cavalry horses are eaten, meaning cavalry becomes infantry. Then the artillery horses are eaten, meaning cannon must be abandoned. Then soldiers begin eating horses still walking, too weak to resist, too cold to feel pain. Discipline collapses. Soldiers break ranks to search for food. They loot Russian villages, finding little because the villages were already poor. They kill each other over scraps. Disease, typhus, dysentery, pneumonia. Men too weak to fight illness. No medicine. Field hospitals overwhelmed or abandoned. Cossacks, Russian light cavalry harassing the flanks constantly, not fighting pitched battles, just picking off stragglers, attacking foraging parties, creating constant terror. November 6th, the first major snowstorm. Temperature drops below freezing, stays there. Men start freezing to death at night. They huddle for warmth. In the morning, comrades find them frozen solid. The road becomes littered with dead, abandoned equipment, dying horses, human excrement. The army leaves a trail of destruction and death stretching for miles. Some statistics from French survivors' accounts. At Vyazma on November 3rd, 5,000 French casualties in a minor engagement. By Smolensk on November 9th. The army has shrunk to 60,000 combat-effective troops. Napoleon pushes them on. They cannot stay in Smolensk. It's a burned ruin with no supplies. November 15th to 17th. Krasno. Kutuzov's army blocks their path. Napoleon fights through with heavy losses. Marshal Ney's Third Corps, forming the rear guard, is cut off. Everyone assumes Ney is dead or captured. Napoleon, showing rare emotion, says, "I have sacrificed too much for the people. I've given enough to glory and to France. Henceforth I must think of myself." But Ney survives. Through brilliant improvisation, he leads his remaining men, perhaps 900 of the original 7,000, across the frozen Dnieper River and rejoins the army. Napoleon weeps when he sees him. The Berezina River, normally crossable at multiple points, but November rain has swollen it. Ice forms, but not thick enough to support men. Too thick for boats, and 3 Russian armies are converging. 144,000 Russians against perhaps 40,000 French combat troops, plus 40,000 stragglers. It should be the end. Complete annihilation. But Napoleon's engineers work miracles. In freezing water, they build 2 pontoon bridges. Men die of hypothermia building them. But the bridges stand. November 26th to 27th. The army crosses. Under fire. Under constant Russian attack. It's chaos. Soldiers, camp followers, wounded, all trying to cross simultaneously. Napoleon gets across. The Imperial Guard crosses in good order. Much of the remaining army makes it. But on November 29th, Russian pressure forces the engineers to burn the bridges before all have crossed. 10,000 stragglers are left on the east bank. Most are killed or captured. The Grande Armée has escaped total destruction. But barely. December 5th, 1812. Smorgon. Napoleon receives news of a coup attempt in Paris, false reports, but he believes them plausible. He makes a decision. Abandon the army. Return to Paris immediately. Preserve his political power. He hands command to Marshal Murat and departs in a sleigh with a small group of aides. Some call it desertion. Others call it political necessity. Napoleon himself believes Paris is the prize worth saving. He's probably right, but it means abandoning the men who followed him into Russia. The army continues west without him, through bitter cold, through blizzards, starving, freezing. December 13th to 14th. The remnants cross the Niemen River, back into Poland. out of Russia. Of the 685,000 men who entered Russia, fewer than 40,000 return in military formation. Another 50,000 struggle back as individuals over the following months. Total losses: approximately 380,000 dead, 100,000 captured, 100,000 deserted or missing. The horses are nearly extinct. Of 200,000 horses, perhaps 10,000 survive. It is the greatest military catastrophe since Hannibal crossed the Alps, perhaps the greatest in European history until World War I. And it's Napoleon's fault. Not the weather, though that contributed. Not Russia's vastness, though that mattered. Napoleon's fault. His decision to invade, his decision to push to Moscow, his decision to wait in Moscow, his decision to delay retreat. The myth of his invincibility is shattered. Europe sees it. His subordinates see it. He himself, though he won't admit it, must see it. The emperor is fallible after all, and Europe sharpens its knives. Let your thoughts drift now through the final campaigns, through desperate brilliance and inevitable defeat, through the last convulsions of an empire built on one man's will. Napoleon arrives in Paris on December 18th, 1812. He's traveled from Smorgon in 14 days, a journey that normally takes 6 weeks. He moves faster than news of the catastrophe. When he appears at the Tuileries Palace, courtiers are shocked. They thought he was still in Russia. The official bulletins have reported victories. Now they see the truth in his face. The empire is in mortal danger. Prussia, occupied since 1806, sees opportunity. General York, commanding the Prussian contingent in Napoleon's army, signs an armistice with the Russians on December 30th without authorization. He effectively declares Prussia neutral. It's technically treason. But King Frederick William III, reading the moment correctly, ratifies it. On February 28, 1813, Prussia formally declares war on France. Sweden joins the coalition. Austria, technically still allied with France, begins secret negotiations with the coalition. But Napoleon is not finished. He conscripts frantically. Boys of 18, 17, even 16 are called up. By spring 1813, he has assembled a new army, 200,000 men. They're not the veterans of Austerlitz. Most have minimal training, but they're French, and Napoleon commands them. May 2nd, 1813. Battle of Lutzen. Napoleon defeats a Prussian-Russian army. It's not a decisive victory. His young conscripts cannot execute the complex maneuvers he envisions, but it's a victory. Europe sees that Napoleon can still win. May 20th to 21st. Battle of Bautzen. Another victory against Prussian-Russian forces. Again, not decisive. The Allies retreat in good order. But these victories come at a terrible cost. Napoleon is trading men for time. Every battle, win or lose, depletes his irreplaceable troops. In June, both sides accept an armistice. Napoleon needs time to train his army. The Allies need time for Austria to mobilize. The armistice expires in August. Austria joins the coalition. Now Napoleon faces Russia, Prussia, Austria, and Sweden. Britain funds them all. By October, the coalition armies converge on Leipzig in Saxony. Napoleon has concentrated his forces to meet them. The numbers are staggering. Coalition forces, 380,000 men. French forces, 190,000 men. Napoleon is outnumbered 2-1, surrounded on 3 sides. Any conventional general would retreat. Napoleon fights. October 16th, the first day, Napoleon attacks the Southern Coalition Army under Prince Schwarzenberg. He nearly breaks through, but he lacks the reserve cavalry to exploit success. The horses died in Russia. The day ends inconclusively. October 17th. A lull. Napoleon could retreat this day. The roads west are still open. His subordinates quietly suggest withdrawal. He refuses. October 18th. The coalition closes the trap. 3 armies attack simultaneously from 3 directions. Napoleon's outnumbered forces fight desperately. They hold their positions through the day, but just barely. October 19th. Dawn. Napoleon orders retreat, but it's too late. Only one bridge crosses the Elster River west of Leipzig. The entire army, 190,000 men, must pass through this single bottleneck, while 3 coalition armies attack from the rear. It's chaos. Units become intermixed. Discipline frays. The rear guard fights to buy time. Then catastrophe. A nervous French corporal, hearing Russian shouts nearby, detonates the bridge prematurely. Thousands of French soldiers are trapped on the east bank. Many drown trying to swim the river in armor. Polish Prince Józef Poniatowski, one of Napoleon's most loyal subordinates, drowns in the Elster rather than surrender. The Grande Armée loses 38,000 killed and wounded. Another 15,000 are captured. 5,000 drown. Coalition casualties are similar, 54,000 killed and wounded. But they can afford the losses. They have reinforcements. Napoleon doesn't. More importantly, Napoleon has been defeated decisively for the first time in a major battle. The myth of invincibility is shattered beyond repair. The retreat becomes a rout. The German states that provided troops to Napoleon switch sides. By November, French forces have retreated across the Rhine. For the first time since the Revolution, the borders of France itself are threatened. January 1814. Coalition armies invade France from the east. They field 350,000 men. Napoleon has perhaps 70,000. What follows is Napoleon's final masterpiece of military art. Not a grand strategic triumph, he's too outnumbered for that, but a brilliant defensive campaign that demonstrates his tactical genius even in defeat. He moves rapidly between enemy columns, attacks isolated forces before they can concentrate, defeats them in detail. February 10th, Champaubert. Napoleon attacks an isolated Russian corps, destroys it. 4,000 casualties for minimal French losses. February 11th, Montmirail. Another quick victory. February 12th, Château Thierry. Another. In 3 days, Napoleon has won 3 battles. The coalition commanders panic. Maybe Napoleon is still invincible. But he's not invincible. He's just better than his opponents. And outnumbered 5-1, even genius has limits. The coalition learns not to divide their forces. They advance slowly, in overwhelming strength. Napoleon can win tactical battles. He cannot win the war. March 9th, Battle of Laon. Napoleon is defeated badly. His army is exhausted. March 30th, the Battle of Paris. Napoleon's subordinates, knowing the cause is lost, negotiate surrender of the capital. Napoleon wasn't there. He'd been maneuvering east, hoping to threaten the coalition rear. By the time he learns Paris has fallen, it's too late. His marshals, the men who followed him from Italy to Egypt, to Russia to Germany, finally refuse to continue. Marshal Ney speaks for them. The army will not march. The army will obey its generals, but not you. It's mutiny. But honorable mutiny. They're trying to save France and Napoleon from complete destruction. April 6th, 1814. The Palace of Fontainebleau. Napoleon Bonaparte, Emperor of the French, King of Italy, Protector of the Confederation of the Rhine, abdicates. The Allied powers have proclaimed that Emperor Napoleon is the sole obstacle to European peace. Faithful to his oath, He declares that he renounces for himself and his heirs the thrones of France and Italy, and that there is no personal sacrifice, even that of life itself, that he is not prepared to make for the interests of France. The words are drafted by Napoleon himself, but they're not entirely voluntary. His marshals have refused to continue. Paris has surrendered. Coalition armies occupy French soil. He has no choice. The abdication is inevitable. But Napoleon, being Napoleon, even in defeat, he tries to salvage something. He abdicates in favor of his son, Napoleon II, the King of Rome. Let the boy inherit what remains. Perhaps the Allies will accept a regency. Perhaps Marie-Louise can rule until the boy comes of age. The Allies reject this immediately. No Bonapartes, no exceptions. Instead, they offer Napoleon sovereignty over Elba, a tiny island off the coast of Italy, 12 miles long, 6 miles wide, population 12,000. They let him keep the title Emperor, Emperor of Elba. It's almost insulting, almost a joke. He accepts. What choice does he have? April 11th, 1814. Napoleon attempts suicide, takes poison he's carried since the Russian campaign, opium, belladonna, white hellebore mixed together. Enough to kill a man. But the poison is old. 2 years old. Its potency has degraded. He vomits violently, suffers terrible pain, but survives. His valet constant finds him in the morning, delirious but alive. Later, Napoleon will say, God didn't want it. Or perhaps it was not time. April 20th, 1814. The farewell at Fontainebleau. Napoleon's Imperial Guard assembles in the palace courtyard. The old guard, veterans who have followed him for years. Through Italy, Egypt, Austria, Prussia, Russia, Germany, France. Through every victory and every defeat. They number perhaps 1,000 men now, all that remains of the Grande Armée. Napoleon descends the palace steps. He's wearing his familiar grey greatcoat, the uniform of a simple soldier. No imperial regalia, no crown, just the man. He stands before them, these men who would die for him, who have died for him, thousands of them. What do you say in such a moment? Napoleon speaks. His voice is steady, but those close enough can see tears on his cheeks. Soldiers of my old guard, I bid you farewell. For 20 years I have constantly accompanied you on the road to honor and glory. In these latter times, as in the days of our prosperity, you have invariably been models of courage and fidelity. With men such as you, our cause could not be lost. But the war would have been interminable. It would have been civil war, and that would have entailed deeper misfortunes on France. I have sacrificed all of my interests to those of the country. I go. But you, my friends, will continue to serve France. Her happiness was my only thought. It will still be the object of my wishes. Do not regret my fate. If I have consented to survive, it is to serve your glory. I intend to write the history of the great achievements we have performed together. Adieu, my friends. Would I could press you all to my heart. He embraces General Petit, commander of the guard, kisses the regimental standard, the eagle standard that has flown over 100 battlefields. Then he turns, walks to the waiting carriage, does not look back. The guard stand silent, watching their emperor leave. Some weep openly. These hardened veterans who have seen horrors beyond description. They weep like children. Napoleon climbs into the carriage, the door closes, the horses move forward. The empire is over. Or so everyone believes. The journey to Elba takes 2 weeks. Napoleon travels through southern France toward the Mediterranean, through regions he once ruled as absolute master. The reception is mixed. Some towns cheer him. others are silent. In some places, angry royalists, supporters of the restored Bourbon monarchy, threaten violence. Allied commissioners traveling with him must protect him from his own former subjects. It's humiliating. The man who commanded half of Europe now requires protection from French civilians. May 4th, 1814. Napoleon arrives at Elba. He lands at Portoferraio, the island's capital, a small port town of perhaps 4,000 inhabitants. The island's mayor greets him formally, presents the keys to the town, traditional ceremony for receiving a sovereign. Napoleon accepts with dignity. He is Emperor of Elba now. However diminished, however absurd the title, he will play the role. He establishes his residence at the Palazzina dei Mulini, a modest two-story building overlooking the harbour. It's comfortable, but nothing like the palaces he once inhabited. The Tuileries in Paris, Schönbrunn in Vienna, the Kremlin in Moscow. But it has a view. Napoleon spends hours on the terrace, telescope in hand, watching the sea, watching ships pass, watching the world continue without him. He's 44 years old. Most men at 44 are in their prime. Napoleon feels ancient, finished. But is he? Napoleon, being Napoleon, cannot simply retire. Even ruling a tiny island, he must be active, must improve, must organize. He throws himself into governing Elba with the same intensity he once governed France. He reorganizes the island's administration, streamlines tax collection, improves roads. Elba's roads are terrible, barely navigable. He orders them widened, graded, properly maintained. He establishes a regular ferry service to the Italian mainland, negotiates trade agreements with Tuscany. Elba produces iron ore and wine. Not much, but something. Napoleon works to expand these industries. He creates a small army. 1,000 men, his imperial guard who followed him into exile, plus local volunteers. He drills them personally, holds reviews. They wear French uniforms, carry French weapons, maintain French discipline. It's almost touching. This tiny army on this tiny island, playing at being an empire. Napoleon also improves education, founds a school, donates books from his personal library, ensures the children of Elba receive proper instruction. He attends to details that emperors normally delegate: the water supply for Portoferraio, street lighting, sanitation. He personally inspects construction projects, corrects plans, directs workers. The people of Elba are initially wary. This man brought war to all of Europe, caused millions of deaths, and now he's here, organizing their garbage collection? But gradually, they warm to him. He's accessible, fair. He listens to petitions, resolves disputes personally. He pays his bills on time, unusual for rulers. He becomes, in an odd way, popular on Elba. But Napoleon is not content, cannot be content. He watches France. News reaches him regularly. Letters from supporters, newspapers smuggled from the mainland, reports from visitors. And what he hears troubles him, excites him, gives him hope. Louis XVIII becomes King of France in May 1814. He's 59 years old, obese, suffers from gout, has lived in exile for 23 years. He's not a bad man, not stupid, not cruel, but he's completely out of touch with modern France. He tries to be moderate, issues a charter promising constitutional government, guarantees most revolutionary gains, property rights, equality before law, religious freedom. But his court, the émigrés who fled France during the Revolution, want the old order restored, completely. They pressure Louis to roll back reforms, return confiscated lands to the aristocracy, restore noble privileges. Louis XVIII tries to balance these competing demands, pleases no one, alienates everyone. The army is furious. Napoleon's veterans are pensioned off at reduced rates. Officers who served the empire are dismissed, replaced by royalists who fled 20 years ago and never fought a battle. The legendary Marshal Ney, the bravest of the brave, is given a meaningless ceremonial position. Marshal Soult is forced into retirement. Thousands of junior officers find themselves unemployed. These men gave everything for France. Many are wounded, decorated. They conquered Europe. And now they're treated as embarrassments, failures. Resentment builds. The peasantry is unhappy. Rumors spread that the church will demand return of confiscated lands, that peasants who bought church property during the revolution will lose everything. The bourgeoisie, the middle class that benefited most from the revolution, fears losing status. Under Napoleon, merit mattered. Under the Bourbons, birth matters again. By late 1814, France is profoundly unsettled, not quite rebellious, but dissatisfied, restless, longing for something. Napoleon hears all this on Elba, and he begins to think. Winter 1814 to 1815, Napoleon receives intelligence that troubles him. The Congress of Vienna, the meeting where Allied powers are reorganizing post-Napoleonic Europe, is considering moving him. The British argue Elba is too close to France, too accessible. They want him somewhere more remote. St. Helena is mentioned, a volcanic rock in the South Atlantic, 1,200 miles from any continent. Escape from there would be impossible. Napoleon has no confirmation this will happen, but the rumor alone is enough. If they move him to St. Helena, he'll never leave, never see France again, never return to the world stage. He's 45 years old. Maybe he has 20 years left, maybe 30. Will he spend them on a rock in the Atlantic? Number. He decides to return to France. It's insane, suicidal. He has 1,000 soldiers. France has an army of 200,000. Europe has mobilized 700,000 troops at Vienna. The odds are impossible. But Napoleon has never accepted impossible. He begins planning. Secretly, his most trusted officers are informed. Bertrand, Drouot, Cambronne. They will come with him. The plan is simple. Sail to France, land on the southern coast, march to Paris, rally the army along the way. It depends entirely on one assumption. The French army will not fire on him. The soldiers who followed him for 20 years will not shoot their emperor. It's a tremendous gamble. If he's wrong, he'll be captured or killed within days. But Napoleon has always trusted his understanding of men, of loyalty, of the bonds forged in shared hardship. February 26th, 1815. Night. Napoleon boards the brig Inconstant with 1,000 men, 7 small ships total. It's all Elba can provide. The British frigate HMS. Partridge patrols nearby, supposed to watch Napoleon. But Captain Ardai is at a party in Livorno. The ship is elsewhere. Napoleon's flotilla slips away in darkness. By dawn, they're at sea, heading for France. If the British Navy catches them, it's over. 7 small ships against British warships. No contest, but fortune favors Napoleon, or perhaps the British are incompetent. The flotilla reaches French waters undetected. March 1st, 1815. Golfe Juan, near Antibes, the ship's beach. Napoleon and his 1,000 men wade ashore. They're back in France. Technically, Napoleon is committing invasion. Treason. The penalty is death. But he's not thinking about penalties. He's thinking about destiny. Napoleon immediately marches north, toward Paris, 700 miles away. He avoids major cities initially, takes mountain roads through the Alps. The route Napoleon, Later generations will name it this, commemorating his march. The countryside reacts with confusion. Napoleon? Here? But he's supposed to be on Elba. Royalist officials send urgent messages to Paris. Napoleon has landed. He's marching inland. He has 1,000 men. Louis XVIII is initially unconcerned. 1,000 men? That's nothing. Send a regiment to arrest him. But something extraordinary begins to happen. March 7th, near Grenoble. The 5th Regiment of the Line, 1,500 men under Royalist officers, marches south to intercept Napoleon. They meet on the Route Napoleon, a narrow road through mountains. Nowhere to maneuver. Just two groups of men facing each other. The Royalist commander, Major Delessart, orders his men, "Prepare to fire! Aim at the traitor!" Napoleon, standing with his tiny force, understands this is the moment. Everything depends on what happens in the next minute. He steps forward, alone, walks toward the 5th Regiment. His men watch, horrified. If they fire, he's dead. Napoleon walks until he's perhaps 50 feet from the front rank, well within musket range. Then he stops. He opens his coat, exposes his chest, the familiar gesture from 100 battlefields, and he speaks, his voice carrying across the silent mountainside. "Soldiers of the 5th, do you not recognize me? I am your emperor. If any man among you wishes to kill his emperor, here I stand." Silence. The Royalist officers repeat their orders. "Fire! Fire on the traitor!" The soldiers stand motionless. These are veterans. They've served under Napoleon, followed him through Russia, through Germany, through France. Then, from somewhere in the ranks, a voice. "Vive l'Empereur!" Like a dam breaking. The entire regiment, 1,500 men, break ranks, rush forward, surround Napoleon, cheering, crying, throwing their shekos in the air. "Vive l'Empereur! Vive l'Empereur!" The Royalist officers try to stop them. Useless. Their men ignore them. Some officers join the cheering. Within minutes, Napoleon's force has grown from 1,000 to 2,500. Major Delessart, abandoned by his men, flees to Grenoble to report the disaster. Napoleon marches on. Toward Grenoble, which should be defended by 3,000 troops. March 8th. Napoleon reaches Grenoble. The city gates are closed. Cannon on the walls point at his approaching column. He sends a message. "Open the gates, or I will break them down." Inside, the garrison debates. Fire on Napoleon. He's a traitor, but he's also Napoleon, the man who made France great, the man they followed for 20 years. Before any decision is reached, soldiers inside the city open the gates themselves. Napoleon enters Grenoble to wild celebration. The garrison joins him en masse. Now he has 6,000 men. News spreads across France. Napoleon has escaped. He's in France. The army is joining him. Louis XVIII sends Marshal Ney, the bravest of the brave, to stop Napoleon. Ney promises Louis, "I will bring him back in an iron cage." March 14th. Ney's army of 6,000 encounters Napoleon near Auxerre. Ney tries to arrest Napoleon. Napoleon embraces him. "My dear Michel, we have made too many campaigns together. Will you really fire on your old commander?" Ney weeps. His entire army defects to Napoleon. Now Napoleon has 14,000 men. It becomes a pattern. Every army sent to arrest him joins him instead. The 7th Regiment, the 14th, the 20th. Units Napoleon led to victory in Italy, Egypt, Austria, Prussia. They remember, and they choose him. By March 15th, Napoleon has 20,000 troops. He's 250 miles from Paris. Louis XVIII panics, orders the army to defend the capital. But which army? Half the soldiers are already deserting to Napoleon. March 19th, evening. Louis XVIII receives definitive intelligence. Napoleon will reach Paris tomorrow. The army will not fight him. The king must flee. That night, Louis XVIII leaves Paris in a carriage, heading northeast, toward Belgium, toward British protection. The Bourbon Restoration has lasted 10 months. March 20th, 1815, 9 p.m. Napoleon enters Paris. The Tuileries Palace is lit. Crowds fill the streets. Massive crowds. Tens of thousands. Cheering, singing the Marseillaise. Napoleon emerges on the balcony. The crowd roars. He's back. The eagle has returned. It's been 20 days since he landed at Golfe-Juan. 20 days to reconquer France without firing a shot. It's the most extraordinary political comeback in history. But Europe is already mobilizing. 700,000 troops. Britain, Russia, Austria, Prussia, all united in one goal. Destroy Napoleon. Permanently this time. Napoleon has maybe 3 months before they arrive. 3 months to prepare. 3 months to build an army. 3 months before the final reckoning. The 100 days have begun. Napoleon reclaims power with remarkable speed. Within hours of entering Paris, he's working 16-hour days again. Back to his old intensity. He appoints ministers, reorganizes government, issues proclamations. Most importantly, he needs an army, fast. France is exhausted from 20 years of war. The population is war-weary. But Napoleon's call resonates with veterans. Within weeks, 280,000 men mobilize. Many are veterans. They remember glory. They remember brotherhood. They remember being part of something greater. Others are conscripts, boys drafted hastily, minimal training. But they're French, and Napoleon commands them. Equipment is problematic. 20 years of war have depleted stockpiles. Muskets are available. France has plenty. But cavalry horses are scarce, artillery horses even scarcer. The losses in Russia were never fully replaced. Napoleon does what he can. He reorganizes units, combines depleted regiments, creates new formations from veterans and conscripts mixed together. He also needs political legitimacy. The returning Bourbon king still has supporters. Napoleon needs to show he's not just a military dictator. He promulgates the Acte Additionnel, a constitution establishing constitutional monarchy, limited suffrage, parliamentary oversight. It's more liberal than anything Napoleon previously offered. Is he sincere? Probably not. Napoleon believes in strong executive power, but he needs popular support. If a liberal constitution helps, so be it. A plebiscite is held in May. Do you approve the new constitution? Result: 1.5 million yes votes, 4,000 no votes. The voting is neither free nor fair, but the margin suggests genuine support. France wants Napoleon, or at least France prefers Napoleon to the Bourbons. But political support won't stop 700,000 coalition troops. At the Congress of Vienna, the Allied powers receive news of Napoleon's return with horror and fury. They'd shown mercy at Fontainebleau, exiled him to comfortable Elba, given him a pension, let him keep his title. And he repays them by invading France, overthrowing the legitimate government. There will be no mercy this time. March 13th, 1815. Before Napoleon even reaches Paris, the powers at Vienna declare him an outlaw. Napoleon Bonaparte has placed himself outside civil and social relations, and, as an enemy and disturber of the peace of the world, is delivered up to public vengeance. Delivered up to public vengeance. That's the diplomatic language for, if we catch you, we'll execute you. The Seventh Coalition forms immediately. Britain, 93,000 troops under Wellington, assembling in Belgium, Prussia. 120,000 troops under Blücher, also in Belgium, Austria. 210,000 troops mobilizing in southern Germany, Russia. 167,000 troops marching west from Poland, various German states. Additional 100,000 plus troops, total over 700,000 men. All converging on France. Napoleon faces them with 280,000. And not all can be deployed immediately. He needs garrisons for fortresses, reserves to defend Paris, forces to watch other borders. Realistically, for offensive operations, Napoleon can field perhaps 125,000 men. He's outnumbered 6-1. His only hope? Attack before they concentrate. The British and Prussians in Belgium are nearest. Total 213,000 men. But they're assembling separately. About 15 miles between Wellington and Blücher. If Napoleon can march north quickly, strike at the junction between the two armies, defeat each separately before they unite. It's possible. Barely. It's the same strategy that won Austerlitz. Exploit enemy dispersion, achieve local superiority at the decisive point, defeat them in detail. It worked in 1805. Will it work in 1815? Napoleon prepares. June 15th is the target date. He'll cross into Belgium, strike Wellington and Blücher before they're fully ready. It's a desperate gamble. But what choice does he have? Wait for the coalition to invade France with overwhelming force. Number. Attack is his only option. June 14th. Napoleon leaves Paris. His army is already marching north. 125,000 men, 7 corps, the Imperial Guard, the best cavalry in Europe. It's not the Grande Armée of 1805. That army died in Russia. But it's professional, experienced, led by veterans who know their trade. And Napoleon commands them. That still counts for something, doesn't it? June 15th. Dawn. The French army crosses the Belgian frontier. Wellington, headquartered in Brussels, is taken completely by surprise. He didn't think Napoleon would attack so soon. Intelligence suggested mid-July at earliest. Blücher is equally surprised. His Prussian army is scattered across a wide area. They'll need time to concentrate. Napoleon has achieved strategic surprise. His plan is working. So far. But wars aren't won by surprise alone. Now comes the fighting. Waterloo. The final battle. Let your mind settle into this day. This battle? The most famous battle in history. The end of Napoleon's story. The end of an age. Close your eyes and drift back to June 18th, 1815. Dawn breaks grey and wet over the Belgian countryside. The rain has stopped, but everything is soaked. Mud everywhere. Deep, sucking mud that clings to boots and wagon wheels. Men wake stiff and miserable after sleeping in wet fields. They shake out damp uniforms. Check their muskets. The powder must be dry, or the weapons won't fire. Share what food they have. Black bread, cold soup, weak coffee. The battlefield stretches before them. A gentle valley perhaps 3 miles wide. Wellington's army occupies the ridge on the north side, the Mont Saint-Jean ridge. Napoleon's army faces them from the south, across fields of rye and wheat, trampled by thousands of feet. Imagine standing there, the smell of wet earth and unwashed men. The sound of thousands of voices, French, English, Dutch, German, a babel of languages, the jingle of cavalry harnesses, the rumble of artillery wheels, the nervous whinny of horses that sense something terrible coming. Wellington's position is strong, his infantry deployed behind the ridge crest, invisible to French artillery. Several fortified positions anchor his line. Hougoumont Chateau on the right, a stone manor house with thick walls and gardens. La Haye-Sainte farmhouse in the centre, surrounded by walls and hedges. These strong points will channel any French attack into killing zones. Napoleon studies the position through his telescope. His face shows no emotion. He's seen stronger positions, broken, stronger armies. This is just another battle, another enemy to defeat. But Napoleon is not at his best. His body betrays him. 20 years of campaigning have worn him down. At 45, he feels ancient. His movements are slower, his mind less sharp. The superhuman focus that let him visualize entire battlefields, calculate angles and distances, anticipate enemy responses. It's still there, but dimmed, like a candle burning lower. Still, he has advantages. His army is experienced, veterans, men who have followed him through Russia and back. They believe in him still. And Wellington, for all his defensive genius, has never faced Napoleon personally. The French emperor waits for the ground to dry. Artillery needs firm ground. Cannonballs that strike dry earth bounce, cutting through multiple ranks of men. Cannonballs that strike mud simply bury themselves. Physics matters in war as much as courage. Morning passes slowly. Men wait. Check equipment again. Write last letters home, just in case. Some pray. Others sharpen bayonets that are already sharp. Anything to occupy the mind. Then the order comes. The artillery opens fire. The sound is beyond describing. 84 guns firing nearly simultaneously. The earth shakes. The concussion punches your chest even hundreds of yards away. Smoke billows across the valley. Thick, white, acrid smoke that burns your throat and stings your eyes. For an hour, French artillery pounds Wellington's positions. Cannonballs scream overhead. Some strike the ridge and bounce through the British ranks. Men simply cease to exist, one moment standing, the next just red mist and scattered pieces. But Wellington has positioned his infantry brilliantly. Behind the ridge crest, lying down, the cannonballs mostly pass overhead. The bombardment is terrifying but less effective than Napoleon hoped. Then comes the first assault. Marshal Ney orders d'Erlon's corps forward. 16,000 men in massive columns. The drums beat the pas de charge, the attack rhythm that has carried French armies across Europe. The men advance, singing La Marseillaise, the soldiers' song. The columns climb the slope, through the mud, through the smoke. British artillery tears gaps in the formations, but the columns keep coming. Close the gaps, step over the dead, keep moving. They crest the ridge and see British infantry standing in thin red lines, 2 ranks deep, waiting. The range closes, 50 yards, 40, 30. The British fire. The sound is like tearing canvas, magnified 1,000 times. The first rank fires. Smoke. The second rank fires through the smoke. More smoke. Musket balls tear through the French columns. Men fall in heaps. The formations waver. Officers shout orders. The French try to deploy from column into line to return fire effectively. But they're taking casualties too fast. Then British cavalry charges. 2,000 heavy horsemen. Massive men on massive horses. They crash into the disordered French infantry like a wave hitting a sandcastle. It's magnificent and terrible. The cavalry scatters the French, captures eagles, the sacred regimental standards. But the cavalry charges too far, drunk on success. They reach the French artillery positions. Then French cavalry countercharges, and the British, exhausted and disordered, are cut down. The first assault fails. Thousands dead on both sides. The lines haven't substantially changed. And then Napoleon receives the news he's been dreading. Prussian forces sighted to the east. Blücher is coming. Despite being 72 years old and injured, despite his army being defeated 2 days ago, Blücher has regrouped, and is marching to Wellington's aid. Napoleon sends troops to delay the Prussians, but now he's fighting on two fronts, and time is running out. He must break Wellington before the Prussians arrive in force. The battle becomes desperate, frantic. Marshal Ney, commanding the French centre, sees what he thinks is British withdrawal, actually just tactical repositioning. He orders cavalry charges, unsupported by infantry. 5,000 French cavalry, cuirassiers in breastplates, lancers with pennants streaming from their weapons, chasseurs on swift horses, the finest cavalry in Europe. They charge up the muddy slope toward Wellington's infantry. The British form squares, hollow squares, bristling with bayonets. Cavalry cannot break a properly formed square. It's mathematically impossible. Horses won't impale themselves on bayonets. But the French cavalry tries, again and again. They swirl around the squares like waves around rocks. Magnificent, futile. British artillery fires canister, turning each gun into a giant shotgun. Horses and men go down in tangled heaps. The cavalry withdraws, reforms, charges again. This continues for hours. It's madness. Ney has 5 horses killed under him. 5 times he remounts and charges again. He's lost his mind. The trauma of Russia, of Leipzig, of everything. Something has broken inside him. Napoleon watches, appalled. His cavalry is being destroyed for nothing. But he doesn't stop it. Perhaps he's too distracted by the Prussian threat. Perhaps he no longer trusts his own judgment. The afternoon wears on. The sun moves toward the western horizon. The Prussians are arriving in increasing numbers on the eastern side of the battlefield. French troops there are fighting desperately, but they're being overwhelmed. Then La Haye-Sainte falls, the fortified farmhouse in Wellington centre. The German defenders run out of ammunition after hours of fighting. French infantry storms through. French artillery moves forward into close range. Wellington's centre is weakening. Casualties are mounting. His reserves are thin. If Napoleon strikes now with fresh troops, the line might break. Napoleon makes his decision. He commits the Imperial Guard. Picture this moment. 5,000 men. The Garde Impériale, the best soldiers in Europe. They have never been defeated, never retreated. Men with 20 years of campaigning. Grey-moustached veterans who have marched from Portugal to Moscow. They form up in columns, blue coats with red facings, bearskin hats that make them look even taller. They begin climbing the slope, through the smoke, through the mud, through artillery fire that tears gaps in their ranks. But they don't falter. They're the Imperial Guard. Close ranks. Keep marching. The drums beat steady. The Guard is coming. Everyone on the battlefield knows what this means. When Napoleon commits the Guard, battles end. The enemy breaks. This is the final throw of the dice. The Guard reaches the crest of the ridge. Wellington's strongest infantry are there. British Guards Brigade, elite troops. They've been lying down behind the ridge crest. Now they stand, 50 feet away. The British fire. Point-blank range. A massive volley that sounds like a single gigantic gunshot. Smoke obscures everything. When the smoke clears, the front ranks of the Imperial Guard are gone. Simply gone. Men lie in heaps, but the Guard doesn't break. They return fire, fix bayonets, advance into the smoke, another volley, and another. British infantry charge with bayonets, steel on steel, men grappling, shooting at arm's length, and the Imperial Guard retreats, not routed, not panicked, but falling back, giving ground, for the first time in their history. The cry goes up across the battlefield, "La Garde recule!" The Guard retreats. It spreads like wildfire. French soldiers hear it and don't believe it. The Guard retreating? Impossible. But it's true. And the psychological effect is devastating. If the Guard can be beaten, Napoleon can be beaten. The myth of invincibility dies in that moment. On the eastern side of the battlefield, Prussian forces crash through French defences. 30,000 fresh troops hitting exhausted French units that have been fighting all day. The French army breaks, not gradually, not in good order. It shatters. Units that have held their positions for hours suddenly collapse. Men throw away weapons and run. Officers try to rally them. Useless. The army is finished. Wellington sees it. Orders general advance. His entire line moves forward. British, Dutch, Belgian troops sweeping across the battlefield, pursuing. The killing continues in darkness. Napoleon tries to rally the army, positions himself where fleeing troops can see him. Form squares. Stand firm! I am here! No one listens. The current of panic is too strong. Even Napoleon cannot stem it. The Imperial Guard forms a final rear guard, covering the retreat. They're surrounded. British troops call for their surrender. The Guard dies, but does not surrender, one general reportedly replies. Or possibly just merde. Shit. The sources disagree on the exact words, but the sentiment is clear. The Guard is overwhelmed, the bravest of the brave, destroyed in the mud of Belgium. Napoleon flees south. His carriage is captured by Prussian cavalry. They find his personal effects, his maps, his correspondence. He escapes on horseback, riding through the night, through the rain that has started again, back toward Paris. Behind him, the battlefield is a nightmare. 50,000 casualties, dead and wounded lying in the mud. Some will lie there for days before anyone collects them. The wounded cry out in the darkness, begging for water, for help, for death. Waterloo. The word enters history, a synonym for final defeat, for the end of dreams. Napoleon has gambled everything and lost. The 100 days are over. The final campaign has ended. All that remains is surrender and exile. But first, there are a few more days, a few more decisions. The story is not quite finished.